Sally, it seemed that there was a lot of mutual ground that they covered here, and a little bit of a love-in, lots of mutual respect.
Yeah, that's right, and that was the main aim of this meeting originally too. There wasn't supposed to be any great policy declarations. It was a meeting to build trust and to try and strengthen a friendship. Obviously, South Korea and the US have been allies since the end of the Korean War, and for the first time, I think this meeting was going to be a little bit of a contentious one. Two very different leaders with very different ways of going about things. And one of the first comments there from Donald Trump was that the era of strategic patience regarding North Korea has failed, and it's time to change the tune towards the way that the US and what he's suggesting there is South Korea change its tune too in terms of how they deal with North Korea. Now, one of the main contentious issues between the two leaders perhaps during this meeting, which wasn't actually mentioned in the statement just there, will be the THAAD, the US Defense Missile System. And that was an agreement that was made between the Park administration. Obviously, South Korea has ended its 10 years of conservative rule, and Moon is now a liberal leader, and his approach to the North Korea issue is quite a different one. It's one perhaps a little bit like Obama's doctrine, the era of strategic patience, is one of trying to build a relationship with North Korea once again, to try and soften the tone, to try and bring it to the negotiation table, while the US has got a maximum pressure approach, which not only includes the deployment of the THAAD defense system, which is in southeast South Korea, but also the way in which it's conducted sanctions in terms of blocking a bank that is allegedly filtering illicit funds between China and North Korea. So the US has been pushing China to do more on this particular issue. China is concerned over the fact that it's got 90% of its trade invested in North Korea, and it's also starting to pressure North Korea in terms of the way that this THAAD missile system has been deployed to South Korea by the US as well. So there's a fairly tense trifecta between the three countries, but Moon is very aware of the fact that he needs to play both hands very carefully. He needs both the US support and also the support of China.
It's interesting what you're saying there, because you're right, Moon was talking about sanctions and dialogue, whereas Trump was talking very much of North Korea being a menace, a much stronger approach. Interesting, though, Sally, that there was no Q&A, no question and answer session at that press conference, where you can imagine the journalists were dying to ask both of them lots of questions with all of the news stories that have been going around. Why do you think they didn't have a Q&A?
Well, I think it's a fairly touchy issue here, and one of the main focuses for Moon was to come over and to try and form a bond. Trust was his first word in terms of approaching this particular meeting. So perhaps opening up a Q&A would have really opened up the questions about the contentious issues that probably still remain ones that need to be discussed upon. I mean, in terms of the trade issue, Trump has once called it a horrible deal for the US. In terms of the North Korea issue, I mean, these are two very different leaders. Moon, a very liberal one, and his approach, like I said, to the North Korea situation is quite stark in comparison to Trump's. Now, back to the THAAD issue, he's always had an ambiguous tone in regards to this massive deployment system that's sitting in the southeast of the country. There's been widespread protests across South Korea saying that it's going to be bad for the environment, bad for the health of the people. And President Moon Jae-in has said that there'll have to be an environmental study done before any more parts of this THAAD defence system will be installed across southeastern Korea. So I think that to have a Q&A would have opened up a whole can of worms that perhaps President Moon wasn't quite ready to address, because he's really now trying to build a strong relationship with the US, especially considering that China is just stepping back a little bit on this issue.